So this is business 483. This is the MuMate case discussion. So we're going to be starting here. So the first question is, it says, review the summary data from the negotiation results. Which team had the highest pre-money value? So we'll start with that. Which team had the highest pre-money value? And I assume it's talking about MuMate's value versus the venture capitalist versus if they were to get a loan or take something out with based on their working capital. Anyone want to start us on this?
Well, I can start, and I doubt it's very accurate, but this is what I saw. As far as the pre-money value for MuMate under the which venture capitalist was, now I'm forgetting. Now I can't remember the name. DuPage, is that what it is?
Page, yeah.
I don't know if you guys found a term sheet for them, but I couldn't find a term sheet. So I don't know.
It's spread throughout the text.
Yeah, and I never found an actual pre-money valuation other than I knew they were trying to raise $2.5 million. But in the other case, with the Astoria Partners and the Prosper Fund, I found that the Astoria Partners had the highest pre-money valuation at $7.5 million. And then Prosper had a pre-money valuation of 4.5. But I don't know what the DuPage, I don't know if it ever said, and I didn't, because I wasn't sure how they wanted to go about it as far as coming up with that 2.5 million all in one round or separating it, which would affect the pre-money valuation as well. So I'm not sure on that venture capitalist firm, but I know that Astoria had the highest pre-money valuation from what I can see.
See, I took those questions as to mean that there were supposed to be instructions somewhere where we would have a pre-discussion negotiation session, and we would negotiate. So somebody would take on the DPV side, somebody else the MuMate, and those two teams would then negotiate with each other. And then this discussion, we were just kind of evaluating how our negotiation went.
I also agree with that. I think that's supposed to happen. I have a roommate that so I think that's what was supposed to happen. We're going to go through it as best we can, but I think it might have just been a link was left out. I TA for the school, and so I know a lot of times with this new iLearn, it's pretty easy to accidentally not link or hyper.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So but yeah, I agree.
That makes the most sense this week, Austin. What you just said.
Yeah, because this, I mean, from what Brother Nebuchadnezzar put on the discussion or on the announcement page, I don't know, just nothing really fits with this case analysis. So,
yep. So let's go ahead and try. We'll try our best on it. We'll try to look at it from the point of view. We'll try to switch point of views and stuff. But let's just try to do our best here. So the second question doesn't apply. It just doesn't apply. So I guess okay. So we're all going to look at it from the DPV side. And so what were the goals, I guess, of DPV in this negotiation? And I guess I can start. So they obviously, any venture capitalist firm wants they can also want they want the business to be successful so that they can turn around their money, make a lot of money. So I feel like with this one, they might have valued it a little higher than they should have, so that they could get more equity out of it. And dilution terms in there as well, so that whatever they have, they would stick with it. What do you guys think?
I kind of thought the same thing as you, Austin. I think that the DPV firm wants to, because really what they're looking for is to expand nationally, and I think DPV obviously sees the value of MuMate and how they've done so successful as far as like on a regional basis, and they think that they can expand it past that and go into the national stage. And I think what you said about ownership and dilution is important here, because at least from what I gathered out of the case study, they weren't sure. MuMate wasn't sure what exactly DPV had in mind as far as equity control, and how much they actually wanted to change things in the future, just based off of the business model. So I think it's kind of hard to say what DPV actually wants out of this, but I can imagine they want a fair stake in the equity, and I'm sure since they're the ones that are kind of taking on the financial responsibility of taking it on a national, I think that they kind of need some compensation for that, and as well as having a say in how the business runs itself. So I'm sure they'll want control over the board, and I don't know what they'll do with as far as the founders, keeping them on the board or not. But I'm pretty confident that they'll want to bring in their own CEO to kind of continue to run it, to bring it to the national phase. So I don't know exactly. That's just kind of the things that I was thinking of, as putting myself in their position that I would consider important.
Yeah, I'm just looking through both of these papers that we were to read. I could have sworn that I read somewhere that that they were going to bring an outside CEO in. Oh no, that was Astoria. Okay, sorry, never mind. Astoria was going to bring in an outside CEO, and then they were going to mess around with the board of directors. Sorry, I got my wires crossed here. I just from my career right now, I just know that the beverage market is incredibly hard to penetrate, because there are so many long-standing, very successful relationships between beverage manufacturers, beverage distributors, and the retailers, right? So, for example, with my company, Coca-Cola, is similar to Pepsi and some other models where you have a corporate entity that is in charge of branding and the raw a syrup or recipe or whatever you want to call it, and then they license that out to local bottlers that then use that syrup or that recipe to fill the bottles, distribute them to local retailers, manage the sales on the local level, with the national companies still managing sales on a national level, and then retailers either taking delivery at their distribution hub and then delivering it out to their stores, or the bottle distributors are taking trucks directly to the convenience stores, the grocery stores, what have you, and deliver directly to the final point of sale, where then the end user takes it off of the shelf and either consumes it immediately or takes it home for future consumption. And it mentions it in the case study too. There's a lot of small brands that have some initial success, almost kind of like viral marketing, and they gain some traction on the local market, but because there are such great varying local tastes, it's really hard to repeat that same kind of success as in this case. I think they were in Seattle, Oregon, or somewhere up there. Washington State, isn't that where they are?
Seattle.
So that's kind of a unique population, and it would be hard to replicate that same success, let's say, in Florida or the South. California, maybe New York, but along the East Coast, the Midwestern states, I think it will be hard. Those kind of consumers are not that concerned about organic ingredients, protein, and so on and so on. So you would have an even smaller niche market. So from that point of view, I think DPV would want to get it as cheap as possible and then take over the reins as hard as possible so that they are truly in charge of MuMate's future and approach to market.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like how it seems like every case study somehow someone has experience with what we're discussing, and that's awesome that you can bring your bottling experience to the discussion with the beverage case, So for the valuation, I wasn't sure, and it could be split up into a Series A and a Series B, or it could all be in one, depending on what MuMate wants to do. So did anyone have a valuation?
I didn't have a valuation for them because, like you said, there was too many variables that I don't know. I didn't feel like we had enough information. But I guess if we were supposed to negotiate it, we were
supposed
had the
and
information.
we would have it. Dang it!
So no, I didn't come up with a valuation for.
Well, isn't a typical valuation for a formula about 2-3 times the annual revenue?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
That would put him, given the last few years here, we'll put him somewhere in the, because that's in thousands, right? Exhibit 6.
Yeah, it's in thousands.
So that will put him right at 2-3 million. And then their own, the confidential paper, they wanted to raise $2.5 million in external capital to get the cash flow to break even. So to me, that kind of sounds like they're not really ready. They're not at a stage where they can raise that much money, because otherwise they would pretty much have to give up all their shares.
Yeah.
And so for the internal rate, what is it? Internal rate of what's the IRR? Internal rate of
revenue.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. Did anyone get that? I did not get that one. So I guess we'll keep moving. So for the board seat, do you guys think, and there's, I don't know, and they were the ones that, can't remember, they were okay with Taylor being one of the, on the board, right?
DPV?
Yeah.
I don't think it said anything. I think that was in the confidential statement, because that's what initially I thought, and then I kept reading and I couldn't find it anywhere. I think it's on the confidential page, right there on the second page on the top.
Yeah, the only information that I found, I think, was in regards to the composition of the board was on that other case, as you're mentioning, Herb. I didn't see anything about DPV and how exactly they wanted to go, because I think that was one of their big questions going into their negotiation with them, was looking at how Astoria and Prosper wanted to break up the board. I think they were using that information to negotiate with DPV. Yeah. Which, I mean, obviously for MuMate, they really want to keep at least one of them in there. I know one of them says she wanted to act as CEO until she felt she couldn't fill that role anymore. But it seems like from the venture capitalist point of view, as you were mentioning, Herb, that they'd probably want to have full control of those measures. So I don't know. I would assume that DPV, just like the other ones, would want to have at least one or two of their own people on the board that actually had more than just voting rights, but could actually make decisions.
Yeah.
As a CEO or something.
And with that, I think it meant. I'm pretty sure it mentioned that in the actual case study that they were worried about an outsider kind of taking over the operations and using product that does not meet their idea of a healthy product. So.
Right. Yeah. Because I know that they would definitely wanted to. Because they were afraid, I think, that someone else would come in and look at how they're outsourcing and then just do it completely different, which would really ruin their client base, as you were mentioning, her, because it's the affluent people who care about the organic and the protein and the fat that's in it. So if you get rid of that, then really their product isn't very valuable. So I know that was definitely on their mind.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Burt's Bees. Did either one of you do that case study in one of your classes?
No, but I purchased Burt's Bees products, so I'm interested to see what you have to say.
Yeah, so it started with this old geezer, right? He was just running a very low-key operation, and then he started working with this lady, and she was just very aggressive. She really wanted to turn it into money, and she took it to the next level. Then she bought him out, and now they're part of this. It's like Procter & Gamble or something like that, like a big global brand, and they are one of the sub brands under that umbrella. So they completely gave up on the vision of Bert. Bert just wanted to have this little hippie granola kind of outfit, and now it's just a big money making machine. And that's always the danger, right? I mean, it's the same thing. Real estate. If you buy a home from somebody, and then you have the right to do whatever you want. It's yours. So it just depends on how much MuMate wants to dilute their shares. That's why in all the previous case studies, I've always said I would want to do everything I could to hold on to more than 50% of the stake of the shares, if it were my company.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's sometimes you give up too much control, and they start to see the profits as the main goal instead of making sure that the customer gets the value out of the product, and they start to cut corners and the product starts to fail. So I really like that, Herb.
And all of a sudden it's not your brand anymore.
True.
When I think of investors, no investor, no matter how committed they may be to the product, none of them have the emotional connection that the founders do, And so when it comes to staying true to the founding principles of the product or the business, then that comes second to profits, like you were saying, Austin. So like with Burt's Bees and other products, it's not so much about what differentiates you anymore and what really caused the business to start in the first place. It's what about the profits. So I think it's interesting because, like you always mention, Herb, you got to remain in control, especially with a product that is so different. If you lose that niche that you already have, then your profits might be good on paper, but if you lose the appeal of all your customers, then that's a value that you definitely have to take into account, that emotional connection that the founders have to their product. And in some instances, that can be negative, that they can't see past certain things. I think it's just good to have a good, healthy balance of recognizing the difference in the product and how to make it itself profitable.
Yeah, Len, I don't remember. Do you and your wife have a child yet?
No, we don't.
I mean, it's similar to people paying a nanny to take care of their child. Although that nanny may love the child, it's never going to replace how a mother and a father feel in their heart about the child, or foster parents. It may come close, it's still not going to be the same. Blood, that's why they say blood is always thicker than water. And I think it's the same thing, what you just said, Landon, is a brand and the vision of the brand is not going to be as important to anybody else as it is to the founders.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so next question, how important is this deal to DPV? Once in a lifetime, pretty good or pass? And so I was trying to make the numbers work with because they gave us that the financials of MuMate. And they ended up having in, what was it, 2015, the very end? Yeah, 2015. They ended up, on their sheet, they had like 50,000 or 50 million, right? But I put the numbers in and just had that compounded 20% growth each year. And they didn't even get close to that. And so they would really have to go beyond compounded 20% a year growth to reach that goal. So for them, if DPV runs the numbers and finds that out, it'd either be pretty good or pass. But if the numbers somehow they have a really, really big growth rate, more than 20% like they're predicting, and it really does reach that 50 million, then I'd say it's a really good deal for DPV.
I was looking at that as well, and I don't know exactly how they got to 50 million from their actual number of, what was it, 978,000 in 2011. That's a huge jump. But I think what Herb mentioned earlier was really interesting because they've focused in places like Seattle and Southern California where the market is like, that's the prime spot for them, and they're already there. I can't think of many other places in the United States that would have much of a market for it. I can think of like maybe Miami and a few other big cities. Kind of like Herb was saying, as far as being a far-reaching brand, I think they're kind of overestimating their growth. I don't think they have the client base that they think they do. They're using numbers based off of like the most fertile market areas for their product, which I think really kind of skews their future values. So I don't know, as far as DPV's opportunity, I think it's a good opportunity, but I don't know that it's once in a lifetime. I would just say it's a good opportunity because they have shown decent sales. I just think their projections are a little off, especially with what Herb said, taking that into account. I just don't see how they can become as large as they think they can. So I think it's a good deal for DPV, but I definitely wouldn't say it's once in a lifetime.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. Confirmation bias, I think, is what it's called. When you, for example, when you think, okay, all Asian people are terrible drivers, right? And so every time you drive and you see an Asian person behaving badly, it just confirms to you that they're bad drivers, but you're not taking into consideration how few Asians there are in your area and how many bad drivers there are of other ethnicities. So and this is kind of the reverse, right? Because they are so successful in their local market, in the markets that they currently have, they think that they will be equally successful across the board. And they're not taking into consideration local tastes, local preferences. There might already be, you know, Len mentioned Miami, there might already be some kind of homemade, not homemade, but, you know, low volume manufacturer in Southern Florida that already has that market cornered. And now MuMate is going to come in here and think that they're going to be a winner. So I agree with Landon. I think they haven't given enough backup to their forecasts. There's not enough solid evidence that they will really be that successful and reach those sales goals.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Herb. So I guess let's get the last one here. And you hit on this, Herb, about how you don't think it fits with DPV's investment focus. I'd say, you know, if the numbers, if somehow numbers work out, that's great. But they even said, you know, it's going to be 10 to 20% growth each year. And even compounding that growth, it's not adding up to the numbers that DPV wants and is looking for in companies. So I don't think it does. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I think a venture capitalist, their main focus, you know, goes between growth and the risky type of investment. So I don't think that, I mean, it has the potential to grow a lot if their numbers are correct, like you said, Austin, then it'd be great for DPV. But as far as just a safe investment, it's not that. I don't know. It seems very risky. So I don't know. I don't really think it fits the investment focus, although going with just venture capitalist firms, I think they tend to go more on the riskier side of investments. But from what I read, it seemed like DPV kind of focused more on a little more solidly startups. You know, they didn't just grab any startup that seemed like a good idea. So I think overall, it fits, but there are some things that I see that probably wouldn't be in their investment focus for DPV.
Yeah, that's and yeah, it can go either way with that, but I totally agree with you, Landon. So now let's shift focus, I guess, to the MuMate side. Did the co-founders see things in the same way, or did they focus on other interests? And then part of the other activity, I'm sure, writing down the order of importance. But I guess we can just talk about it here. So obviously, I don't think the co-founders see the same things as DPV. I think they have different focuses. They have different goals in mind about MuMate. And specifically, I guess they want at least one of them to be on the board and to be in charge of the thing. And I think they also want a good valuation, and so they get their money. But I don't think they want it to be so high that they lose equity. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that their biggest issue was the pre-money value, so that they could raise enough money to continue their operation and take it to the next level. I think that was their biggest priority. I think board composition was probably the next one. You know, they didn't want to be ousted and just lose all their power to an outside entity.
Yeah, I I agree with you guys there. So from what I could see, one of their biggest things was, like you guys said, the pre-money valuation, the board composition. But what I don't really see on this list is the value that the venture capitalist firm brings to them as far as partnerships and business relationships that they can bring. But I think that that was pretty high on their list because they needed someone that could take them to the next level. So they didn't want just someone that could bring them financial assistance. They needed someone that could bring them the business know-how and their relationships, which I think was pretty important to them in their decision. But I don't see that on this list. But I definitely think that should be included. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point, Landon. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I mean, they do need. They have a lot under their belt, but they both lack the big business experience. You know, the big hitting business. They both have a good amount of experience, and they're both fairly, educated on business and things of that nature. But I totally agree with that, Landon, that they need that expertise that comes with choosing a partner instead of just trying to go for the money.
And I was just thinking what we talked about earlier, that nobody is going to be as passionate as the founders themselves. But I think that's also a downfall. Like you just pointed out, that they just don't have the experience, right? And sometimes you need to kind of have a distance to your baby so you can accurately gauge what needs to be done. Because sometimes painful changes have to be taken, to really show improvement and show a future viability. For example, they may have to change to other ingredients, because if they continue to use these expensive and limited resource ingredients, they may just not be able to reach that certain threshold that will make him a national brand.
Yeah, I totally. So I guess, what do you guys think is the order of most important on this list to least important out of deal terms, pre-money value, board compensation, and option pool?
I think option pool is probably the last on their list.
Yeah.
I think board composition and the value would be towards the top. And I think I'd put, it's hard because deal terms, I mean, that kind of encompasses everything else that we've talked about. So I don't want to put that super low, but I don't know. I feel like money and their board composition is the most important to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think those are their main two interests. They can take up a loan of about $600,000 just based off of half of their current working capital. So they would still need that $2 million. So they need that money. They also really want to have control of the business up till the point where they don't have the expertise to do so. So I totally agree with Landon on that one. Just having those two as the top priorities for them. So let's go with who has the upper hand in this one, DuPage or MuMate?
I think DuPage. By far. I think MuMate just hasn't proven their business model enough yet on a national level. that they are, like Landon said, that once in a lifetime opportunity. They're just not quite there yet. DPV has the experience to make that happen, but I'm not sure if MuMate is that opportunity for them.
Yeah, I mean, they need that money, and if DuPage has that money, then they're going to have the upper hand. Even if they have to give up certain things or certain preferences that they would like, then as long as they get that money, I think they'll be willing to give up some stuff.
Yep, money talks.
Yeah, and I think of, each one of them. Where would DPV be without MuMate? And they'd be fine. They'd find someone else and they'd move on. Whereas MuMate, they need the funds, they need the capital, which puts them in a position where they're more willing to take a value of less an offer of less value, just out of need for the money, if that makes sense. So I think that, as you guys have said, DPV has a stronger point on the side because they can go either way, and if they don't like the deal terms, they can just walk away, and it's not a huge loss for them. Whereas for MuMate, they have a lot at stake. Although they do have other venture capitalist firms that are interested, so that is something to take into account. But overall, I think that DPV does have the upper hand.
Yeah, Len, I think that's a great way of putting it. Where would they be without each other? And then it's quite obvious that DPV has the upper hand.
So, how did the Astora and Prosper term sheet affect your negotiation strategy? Since we didn't have negotiations, I guess hypothetically, how would it?
I think it would make MuMate maybe a little cocky, that they have these extra offers in their back pocket, and a little overconfident. So I think my forecast will be that DPV is not willing to give MuMate what they want, and MuMate, thinking that they have these two other great offers, would refuse. They would walk away from the table, and then they would have to choose one of these other two options, but they would have to give up too much in their shares and their seats on the board of directors.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it gives them a slight advantage than they had before. It's like if you're trying to buy a car, you can be like, well, there's a couple other dealers that gave me a good price for one, so it kind of gives you a negotiation advantage, I guess. But still, I think DuPage has the advantage over them.
Yeah, and just like with when you're trying to sell your car, you can wait too long for that. You think you have all this interest, and then all of a sudden everybody walks away, and you're still left with needing money. And I think that could very easily happen here to MuMate, because just because they have these on the surface great offers from what was it, Astoria and this other company, whatever the other one was, that doesn't mean that they have an agreement with them, right? So if MuMate says, okay, we're willing to do this deal with you, but we want to retain, one of us wants to continue to be the CEO, and we want to have 2 seats on the board of directors. And then Astoria could just laugh in their face and say, never mind, you guys are crazy, and walk away.
Yeah, that's totally true. So how did VC go about valuing MuMate? And this one, I think they did it by revenue and expected growth from the because MuMate had 3 different offers. You had the kind of the gym line where they're going to try to put it there. They had the coffee shops. I forgot what the third one was. Let me see real quick. Yeah, and then national distributors at grocery stores. So I think they also took that into account when they were valuing MuMate. I think that combined with their revenue and expected growth rates gave them the valuation. I guess moving on, what exit value were they expecting?
The Astoria.
It says the VC.
The VCs.
Yeah.
I don't think it said it.
Let's go with DPV, I guess, on this one.
Well, for DuPage, it said invest 3 to 10 million, and then reach revenues of 50 million. So you could say they're looking for a company that does anywhere between $1 million and $3 or $4 million in revenue. Well, maybe not, because that will be their investment. But they would want to look at an exit value about 2 to 3 times revenue. So that will be 150 million dollars that they would want to look for, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So depending on what the share ratio is,
yeah, they'd have to find a way to get at least like 15 million out of them.
yeah. And then it says equity stake average 20 to 30% prior to an IPO or strategic sale. So yeah, I think you're spot on. Probably in that 15 to 20, maybe $30 million they'd be looking in return.
And then moving on to what share of the equity would that dollar amount equal? So if we're putting it at 50 million and they want 15 to 30 million. Let me calculate that out. I swear, ever since I took some Excel classes, I haven't been able to do mental math really well. So 30% at least, at the very least.
Yeah, that's what I get to is 30%.
Awesome. And then we already talked about the dollar amount. And then what other means to the VC? I think we talked about there as well. Any of you got some killer spreadsheets to share?
I don't.
No, I didn't even attempt anything.
Mine is not pretty, man. It's like brainstorming with numbers. So then the next question is from the negotiation activity. What have you learned about bargaining tactics? Not too much, to be honest.
Well, I think one lesson to be learned for, how MuMate came, how they're going about this, similar to what Len and I have said, one, you have this great emotional bond. It's your brand. You built it. You are the one who cooked up these first samples. You came up with the taste profiles. You're the one who went out with the tables for all these yoga classes. So you're just all on fire, and everything you hear is great feedback. But then you got to have that emotional disconnect and that ability to just be honest and say, in all reality, yes, I want to go, I want to shoot for the stars, right? But I need to be realistic. What can I truly deliver? What value can I deliver for VC? And I think that's where MuMate is just falling flat.
Yeah. And then, so do you guys think MuMate should disclose that they have other authors or offers, and do hardball tactics make sense in a negotiation like this?
I think it depends on where DPV is coming from. If they're really interested and another offer will help them increase the deal, then it might make sense to kind of leverage it, like you had mentioned before, Austin. But if DPV is just kind of taking the opportunity as it comes, but they're fine to walk away from it, I feel that bringing up the other offers will kind of not offend, but maybe just frustrate them, and they'll go elsewhere. So I think it really depends on how the negotiation starts. I don't think it's something you should start with at all. But I think in certain cases it can be helpful to leverage other offers. And hardball tactics, I think it really just makes sense only in certain situations. It depends. MuMate, they're in a position where they really don't have a lot to negotiate on. I mean, they have these offers. They either take them or they don't, and they don't have as much leverage, I don't think, as they think they do. I think they see, kind of like Herb was saying, they see a lot of value in their brand because they do have that emotional connection. But I think it would be smart for them to kind of disconnect from that. I mean, it's wise to be firm on your negotiations, but I mean, hardball tactics, I think it really depends on how viable your product is and how much leverage you actually have. If people aren't fighting over the deal to have it, then I don't think a hardball tactic's really right for you. I think you should really focus on how the negotiations are actually going. But it's not for me at least, it's not a cut and dry answer. I think it's very dependent upon each situation for those two questions.
Well, I think both of these questions kind of go hand in hand, right? Is MuMate excited about DuPage? Do they want to enter into a partnership with DPV? In the case study, it says that Cantor, who I believe is one of the higher ups at doesn't really say. Well, I guess he works at DPD as one of the associates. So he is kind of higher up, and he has come several times and visited MuMate, and both Maxwell and Dank value his insight, right? So if they want to enter, if they're seeking a true partnership with DPV, then I think by any means they should bring these offers to the table, and they should say, "Hey, Mr. Cantor, here are two offers from other companies, and this is kind of the term sheet. This is what they're willing to offer." And then Cantor could educate them and say, "Okay, well, in this term sheet, you have to take this and this and this into consideration." on this term sheet, you have to look at it this and this and this way. For example, when I negotiate with the restaurant, you know, a lot of times they hit me with, you know, Pepsi being such a cheaper product. And I usually tell them, you're absolutely right. Pepsi is the cheaper brand. And I try to help them to realize what that means. Because Pepsi is cheaper, they're not going to have the same sales as with Coca-Cola. They're not going to have the same service experience as with Coca-Cola. They're not going to have the same marketing support as they would have with Coca-Cola. And it's the same thing here. You know, Cantor may already be familiar with these two VC companies and may be able to give Maxwell and Dank some really good insight and saying, look, this is how these companies play, and this is how they're going to hurt you, versus us. We may give you less money, but this is how we are actually bringing value to the table to help you grow. So again, you know, if they're just hardball tactics, I think Maxwell and Dank would only be negotiating for money, for an investment. But if they were to disclose the offers, they would look for a true partnership and giving DPV equal access to the information that they have.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's kind of sometimes negotiations a tricky business, and it depends on both parties, to where one tactic might be taken very differently in one situation than another. So I think they definitely have to play the situation by ear to see if you know, DPV would take that as offensive, or if they would might increase their offer because of it. So key in summary here. So here's some things that we can discuss in the key takeaways or summary. So terms allocate economic and control rights, conflicting priorities of investors and entrepreneurs in upside down and downside scenarios. Terms have a price, and VC valuation techniques. Does anyone want to get us started on the summary here?
Well, I don't know. I think for me, specifically on valuation techniques, really anyone can come up with a valuation technique to fit their to fit the goals that they have and the forecast that they have. So I think it's interesting how the valuations were also different between the venture capitalist firms. And it's interesting because there's no one right way to do it, and I think it's because there's so many things to take into account, and every business is different. And I really liked how Herb brought up the factor that going into other places, like, it's not going to be as popular, and those are things that I don't think have been taken into account for this company. But I think it's interesting to apply that in valuation, because it's definitely something that doesn't immediately impact a valuation, but the quality and recognition of a brand is definitely something that can add value or take value. So I found it interesting that all the different techniques of finding valuations, I think a lot of it depends on what your goals and your focuses are in determining that valuation.
Yeah, I think Len hit it right straight on the head. You know, because when you purely look at numbers, you can what do you call it? Interpret the numbers any which way you want.
Yeah.
Right. You can kind of brush the bad numbers to the side and just focus on the great numbers. And so you can manipulate that. It's called selling stories, right? You're not focused on true statistical data. You're interpreting it, and you're telling a story, depending on what your ulterior motives are. What do you really want to accomplish? So you know, that's why people don't like to negotiate, you know, for cars, because they know that usually that car salesman is not telling a true story. He's trying to sell you on nothing but emotions, not on true financial hard data. How much car can you really, how much car do you really need, and how much car can you really afford, and how much is the car really worth? No, they're trying to sell you how much you loved sitting in that car, how much you liked the new car smell, how much you enjoyed the acceleration, how much you enjoyed rubbing your hands over that leather steering wheel. They're trying to capture you with emotion rather than really true, hard financial data.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's interesting how there's so many different techniques for valuation. You know, there isn't necessarily just one technique that can be used, but I really like what you're talking about there, Herb. And just kind of finishing up the summary, I think that there's a good case to kind of look at the points of view of the venture capitalists versus the points of view of the people seeking capital. And I think that they do have conflicting priorities sometimes. The venture capitalists want usually a higher valuation so they can get more equity out of the business, but the actual business, you know, wants to keep as much equity as possible while meeting their, you know, capital needs. But so I thought that was an interesting point with this case, is just kind of putting into view those two differing kind of points of view and kind of conflicts of interest in some areas. But is there anything else?
That's why good negotiations leave both parties as feeling that they've won something. You know, if either party walks away and feels like they've lost something, that partnership is not going to last.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And is there anything else that you guys want to mention on the summary for this?
No, I'm good.
I'm good as well. Thank you.
Well, sounds good. I'll go ahead and end this.